Iran says the strike was an act of war. The president, of course, has been saying it was an effort to prevent war. So what happens next? Retired Army Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin. General, good to have you. What do you think happens next?
Well, what I think happens next is that there's going to be a lot more rhetoric coming out of Iran. They do not want to go to war, Neil, and I don't think that we're on the brink of war simply because Iran has everything to lose. They cannot defeat the Americans, and there's so much unrest in Iran already. Their people are rising up against the Supreme Council, against the mullahs there, against even against the IRGC, and there is no universal support for Soleimani. They're not in mourning in Iran. Anything you see there is staged. So what I think is next is more rhetoric. There may be some low-level things that the Iranians will try to do, but I think ultimately the key here is Baghdad. Is Baghdad going to take a vote to ask the Americans to remain there with certain caveats, or are they going to ask us to leave, which pushes us across the border into Kuwait? I think that's the big thing right now.
Now, these soldiers, the 3,000 to 3,500 that will be making their way to Kuwait, presumably then points north afterwards. I mean, what will their role be, you think?
Well, first of all, I think that they will be in a position in Kuwait, which borders Iraq. They'll be in a position to continue to hammer these Shia militia terrorist targets like Kataib Hezbollah, which is a huge problem there right now. They'll be in a position to continue to launch strikes against them, drone strikes, direct action strikes, and then they will also be in a position to move to other parts of the Persian Gulf region, or even the Middle East, where problems might crop up associated with Iranian attempts to go after American targets. They can certainly go in and reinforce our embassy there, in Amman, Jordan, and other places in that part of the world.
You know, General, it's just maybe me, but it just seems weird to see these protests going on in Baghdad, sympathetic to the cause of the Iranians. We expended a lot of blood and money in this region, and it just seems unusual that they seem to be saying, get out. What do you make of it?
Yeah, well, let's go back and look at the whole picture. What are the protests that started on the 8th of October? What have they been about? They have been about rejecting Iranian influence in Iraq. They've been about wanting a corrupt government in Baghdad to step down. They have actually been more pro-American than has been reported because they see America as being the only stabilizing force in there. So I think that a lot of what we're seeing right now is propaganda, particularly those things that show a lot of support for the mourning factions for Soleimani's death.
You know, there are new images just coming into our offices, General, in Karbala, Iraq. Again, you know, huge gatherings sympathetic to what has happened here with this U.S. air raid. And I'm beginning to wonder whether the Iranians, if you think about it, you know, Soleimani had sort of free passage in and out of the region. In fact, seemed to spite it just to show that he could. So what do we do now if the Iranians build a constant presence there just to sort of put us on the spot?
Yeah, well, first of all, we've got to work with the Iraqi government. I mean, they are key, and they are our allies, and again, we helped to establish this government. We helped them to write a constitution, so we've got to work with them. The problem is that since the fall of Saddam Hussein, the Shias have gained more and more control. And remember that it's about a 60% Shia majority in Iraq, and Saddam Hussein, with only about a 20% Sunni minority, was able to control that part of the world. We need to help them to find a leader that can actually step up, get beyond the corruption, and start to establish law and order in Iraq. And ultimately, I think we've got to do a very serious, objective assessment as to whether we're accomplishing the objectives that we've set out for America, for American foreign policy, and make a decision as to what our long-term objectives are there. And if we can't meet those objectives, then it's time for us to withdraw and move on.
You know, General, as we're continuing to watch this live feed coming into us from Karbala, Iraq, protests and large gatherings of mourners and what have you to protest the U.S. airstrike a little more than 24 hours ago. The question becomes how Iran responds to all of this. Sometimes they try not to leave an obvious fingerprint so that they were the source of the agitation in any provocative action, or they usually deny it. Cyber attacks seem to come to mind because so many times they've done this to U.S. banks and international interests. They might repeat the same type of behavior this go-round. How do we respond to that?
Well, I think, first of all, we have to trust our intelligence community. And I think that first of all, great kudos to the American intelligence community for being able to target not only Soleimani, but Mohandas as well. Mohandas was as bad as Soleimani, quite frankly, and they were both killed. And then there were follow-on strikes after that. So we've got to rely on and trust our intelligence. And our intelligence people have got to be able to tell us not only what is happening, but what the intentions of our adversaries are. They do that primarily through a human intelligence network. So they are very key to us knowing what our adversary is up to and what they plan to do. But when we strike a target and the Iranians say, no, we didn't, we were not in any way involved in that, we were not responsible, we know that that is not the case because our intelligence has been quite reliable here in the last couple of years. I think that one of the things that Mr. Trump has actually done is he has brought a certain integrity back to an analytical process within the intelligence community. We've got to trust them now and go after those targets that they tell us that they have a direct link to Iran and to Iranian support and funding.
All right, General, thank you very, very much.